Okay, your book talks about attribution theory. It's one of my favorite areas, something I've spent some time looking at because in my academic career, some of the people that I worked for are specialized in this, and so you get to know your area a little bit better. Of course, in a textbook like this, just an introduction management class, we're not going to get into a lot of detail. It certainly goes back very far and very deep. There's lots of different theories of attribution that differ slightly, but I'm not going to get into any more complexities for you. I just want to clarify what we have presented so that you have a good grasp of it. And I will add a little bit to the existing theory that Jones and Kelly is who we're representing here. There's Hyder and a whole bunch of other people, but this is Jones and Kelly's taxonomy, their view. So when you make an attribution, you're explaining an event or a behavior. You can explain the behaviors of yourself, circumstances and behavior of yourself, or the circumstances and behavior of others, or why something happened. And we have an innate desire to make sense of this world, as I've been talking about in these videos a little bit. But we have limited amount of time and brain power. We have what's called bounded rationality, which just means bounded means limited or restricted ability to be rational. To be rational, fully rational, we need all the facts and be able to consider them fully. But we don't walk around this world with unlimited brain power and unlimited time. We have to make sense of what we can, depending on how important it is. So I use this example a lot of times. Someone walks into the classroom after class has started, and so they're late. Now, I don't get so upset about students walking in late. You pay the money, you come when you want. But it does cross my mind, what might have caused them to come in late. And I know that there's fundamentally two ways in which I can decide how I feel about that. I could presume that that person is disrespectful, lazy, unconscientious as a personality trait. It was just lost track of time, reckless. Or I can say, oh, something must have happened to that person that restricted their movement. They were unable to come on time. Maybe they had a car accident. Gosh, we're at UCF. Maybe they couldn't find parking, and they came 30 minutes early, and they drove and sat and gave someone a ride to their car finally, and that's what it took, and they're 30 minutes late. Been there. I don't give people rides, but I've been through the parking thing. So but fundamentally what I'm doing is I'm trying to determine, should I hold that person kind of personally accountable for their tardiness, or should I kind of make an attribution, attribute their lateness to something outside of them, an external attribution? That's what this whole thing is about. And there are very serious consequences to what I determine, especially if I'm like your boss and you come in late to work. What I attribute your tardiness to has a lot to do with how I'm going to treat you moving forward. If I think you're being reckless and careless and lazy, then I'm going to treat you accordingly. If I think something happened that was outside of your control, then I'm going to cut you some slack, right? More than likely. So there's three elements that we go through in our mind to determine whether something is an internal or external, has internal or external causality. And they are distinctiveness, consistency, and consensus. So here's how it works. It's fairly straightforward, but you get two of these confused very easily. So I'm going to try to make it super clear. Distinctiveness means that this behavior is distinct to this person in this context. So in other words, John came into my classroom late. I need to determine, I want to have a judgment as to whether that was his fault. I want to hold him responsible or some kind of external thing. How distinctive is this behavior for John? If I have John in 3 other classes and he comes to 2 other meetings every week, and John is never late to any of those other classes, but he's late to this class, that's a very distinct behavior for John. John's never late in the other meeting settings, time-bound settings that I experience him in. That's distinctive. It's not like John. If you say that's not like John, then you're saying it's distinctive for him. Okay. Consistency means if John came in late one time and only once the whole semester, I might say was not consistent. he's almost always on time. That's what's consistent. It's very inconsistent for him to be late. So when someone comes in late for the first time, after 10 or 20 attendances on time, your mind right away says, all things equal, I think there must have been something that happened. You tend to, a person comes in late and they say, John, you okay? Everything good? You know, because in your mind you're thinking you're not usually late. Other people may be regularly late, but you're consistently on time. So all things equal, that's how consistency works. Consensus is the extent to which not just John comes in late, but a whole bunch of people come in right around the same time. So if I'm teaching a class and John and 8 people, in addition to him, come in at the same time, my mind right away says, what's going on? You know, why would there be 8 people come in at the same time? I would likely think like they're in some kind of a team or group activity or from another classroom that ran over, or they were involved in something together. There's one reason probably that all 8 of them are coming in late. So those 3 variables add up. Now, if something is distinctive to someone, it's unusual for them, I tend to make an external attribution for their tardiness. Say, it's not like them, so I think it must have been some other cause of that. If it's not distinctive, if it's like them in other situations to be late, and they're late in my class, then I say, no, it's not distinctive. And I think John has a problem with showing up on time. Consistency, if John obviously shows up the first time late, I say, well, you know, it's the first time, cut him a break, probably something happened. If he shows up a second time, even if he has a great excuse, I say, well, John, you know, you probably need to work on that and get that worked out. Shows up a third, fourth, fifth time. By the 5th time, John shows up in my class late and has a great excuse that seems totally valid. I'm saying, like, I don't even care what you're saying. You're late for the 5th time. That's just, you're responsible. You needed to make some kind of changes, and you haven't, and it's unacceptable. So you see, when something's highly consistent, I tend to make an internal attribution. If it's low in consistency, I make an external. And then distinct consensus. Of course, if a bunch of people come in at once, I make an external attribution. I say there must have been some outside force that acted upon them. Something caused all of them to be late. It wasn't just like by chance. So the question then, the next question is, all right, if this is how it works, then how do we go through in our mind? There are 3 variables there. What if they contradict with one another? What if something, distinctiveness points to an internal attribution, consistency points to an external attribution, and there's not enough information about consensus? Let's say we don't have any information. We just have 2 variables we know about, and they contradict. One saying internal, the other saying make an external attribution. Well, then what information do we use? Because our brains insist that we make some sense of the things that happen around us. And if someone walks in late, you know, I'm interested. I want to know what's going on. I'm interested maybe in their welfare. I'd like to know what's going on. So our minds are always trying to make sense of the things that are happening around us. So what rules the day? Distinctiveness, consistency, or consensus? Well, it depends, of course. It has to be complex like that. It depends on what's most salient to the perceiver. So if I'm the teacher and I'm trying to make sense of it, I'm the perceiver. It depends on which variable seems to give me overwhelmingly strong information. Sometimes the behavior is distinct, is not distinct for the person, so they do it in other circumstances, come late to other meetings. They're consistently late to this class, but they do come in 45 minutes late to a 2-hour class along with 8 people. Consensus is really high. There are 8 people that walked in at the same time. Even though John is one of those 8, I have 2 variables saying make an internal attribution. He's late again, he's always late, he's late in other circumstances. It's possible that I say, yeah, even though John is late, and that is in different contexts, different circumstances, and frequently, consistently, in this case, this is a really distinct behavior along with 7 other people. I think something probably happened. So you see, that's the salience of it. Salience means something that seems most important to the perceiver. They can place greater value on it, more importance on it. There are a couple different biases that you need to be aware of. Your book talks about them, but doesn't give them quite the name they have in the literature. I want to give them a name. when an observer, when we observe someone else's behavior, I'm going to make an attribution for John's tardiness, we tend to overestimate the influence of internal attributional stuff, personality traits, and we underestimate the external factors, like situational variables. So, in other words, we're kind of a harsh critic of other people. Unless you give me information, if I'm perceiving without a lot of information, I'm going to tend to hold you responsible, make an internal attribution for what happened. I'm going to make you accountable. Conversely, when I'm making attributions for my own self, when I'm explaining my own self to myself or to someone else, I tend to overestimate the external factors in the world when I experience a failure. This is a self-serving bias. Sorry, the first one was called a fundamental attribution error. And the self-serving bias is like you'd think, if I'm self-serving, then how do I explain the things that represent me? Well, I say, well, the good things that happen, the positive outcomes, those are mine. Those are because of internal factors, my intelligence and my competence and so forth. When something bad happens, then I want to be defensive of that, and I say that there was an external factor that was outside my control. I failed in this group project. It wasn't because of me, it was because of the group. I succeeded, our group succeeded. Why did that success happen? Because I was in the group and I was a major component of it. So it's self-serving in that regard. So think about attribution as you go throughout your day. You probably don't want to spend your day doing this, but contemplate how much your brain is actually trying to make sense of the world given a really limited amount of information. If we're all perfectly logical, if we didn't have bounded rationales, we would gather information. When my wife gets home in a few minutes, it's past when I expect her home, so I will say, I won't just make an attribution like she must have just been running late or something. I'll say, I drill her. I'd say, where have you been? Show me the odom. I want information, data, I want evidence. But we don't have, well, that wouldn't make for a very good marriage, but also we don't have the resources to do that. I'm busy with other things. I need to make sense of a lot of things in my life. I have to take what information I get and sort of go with it. The more important something is, the more it is important to get more information, the more we're inclined to do that. So, all right, thanks, guys.